My name's Deborah Cheetham, and my ancestors are from the Yorta Yorta Nation. My grandmother, Frances McGee, or as she was more fondly known, Sissy McGee, gave me a birthright of song through my mother Monica and the rest of the family. I'm a singer. It's my way of knowing the world, of giving meaning to everything in the world. Yorta Yorta country embraces both sides of the Murray River, or as the Yorta Yorta have called it for about 70,000 years, the dharngurr. I'll always remember the first time I heard that word dharngurr. One of the aunties gave this word to me, and she said, "It must always be spoken gently and with respect, because the dharngurr is the source of life to the Yorta Yorta people." Yorta Yorta country, Goulburn Valley, northern Victoria, southern New South Wales. This is the rich green land of my ancestors that became, of course, the fruit bowl, if you like, a great source of food and of life to contemporary Australian society. This is the ancient country of my ancestors, the river red gums, the dharngurr. A word would be embedded with so much meaning and, well, a song that is never simply a song. A song is a means for knowing your world, is a means for understanding your own place in the world. It's a way by which you can deepen your own sense of identity. A song is a map for our people, a way to find your way home, if you like. A song was certainly that significant to me. I'm a member of what is known as the stolen generations. I was denied the privilege of growing up with my Aboriginal family, and it was my song that led me home to Yorta Yorta country. When in 2006 I decided that I would like to write an opera that would capture an Aboriginal audience through a story that would resonate with Aboriginal people in Australia. And I had discovered this story of the men and women of the Yorta Yorta Nation taking their destiny into their own hands in 1939 and walking off Kamaragunja Mission Station. This story of the exodus of a people from their homeland, this search for a belonging and a connection to country that the Yorta Yorta would search for the next 40, 50 years of their lives. Such an important story, one that was deserving of an opera. And when I discovered this story, I realised this is a story I could tell through music. I'd already been researching the details of the walk-off from Kamara when I made a discovery. My own Aboriginal grandparents, Sissy McGee and James Little, were part of the story. They carried their firstborn son across the dharngurr from New South Wales into Victoria in that act of defiance in 1939. My song had led me to a place where I could learn that piece of my own personal history. So a song is never just a song. We owe such a debt of gratitude to our grandmothers. The strength of the women in Indigenous society in this nation is legendary. My own grandmother, carrying her firstborn child across the dharngurr in that act of defiance in 1939, when over 200 men, women and their children took their destiny into their own hands. What must Australia have been like in 1939? Well, we don't really have to wonder too much. We know a lot about 1939. Australia was in the grip of a terrible drought. The world was in the grip of the Great Depression. We were on the brink of the Second World War. And this woman, this young woman, Frances McGee, looked at the conditions that she was about to bring her child up in and said, no, enough. This is our land. This is Yorta Yorta land. But we're going to walk away from this mission station and we're going to say, you've taken enough. You've taken our language, our land. You take our children. You will not take our dignity. That strength and courage was passed on from my grandmother to my mother and now to me. And hopefully I'm helping other women find their strength, their courage, their voice. Monica Little was the youngest of the siblings in her family. There was Freddie, Colin, Betty, Madeline, Ernest, and the eldest, Jimmy Little. And they were the brothers and sisters. And they all sang, and they all made music. But Monica was the youngest. Monica was only 4 years old when her mother, Frances, died. Frances died unnecessarily young from a wound that she had received, a cut that became infected. There was no way of receiving medical aid. There was no money for the medicine that could have saved her life. So Monica, my mother, grew up, much of her life was without a mother. But this is where Aboriginal society is so beautifully nuanced. Of course there were the aunties. Of course there was her older sister, Betty. Jimmy, who became, of course, a national legend in Australia, a national treasure. Jimmy often told me that he felt that Monica had the best voice in the family, but the least opportunity as a woman. So you've got this conflict between the strength of Aboriginal women and their role in Aboriginal society on the one hand, and the lack of power or opportunity for women in general on the other. And Monica was caught right in the middle of that. I think we have the right to think we can express ourselves. I think there's still a long way to go in Australian society in general, I would say. Part of the journey really, though, is about knowing your own internal strength and what you're capable of, drawing on that resilience of more than 1,000 generations. I think that women have made a lot of progress in Australian society, Aboriginal women as well. I wouldn't describe it as a quantum leap in real terms. Women still suffer discrimination in just about every avenue that it can be suffered. From financial discrimination, we still don't earn as much as our male counterparts in many areas of society. You know, there's a woman murdered at the hands of her partner in Australia just about every week. In fact, more. The statistics are higher than one a week. We worry in Australia about terrorism. We worry about the external, undifferentiated threat from without, but it's actually the threat from within that's so much more alarming in every way. And of course, Aboriginal women within that picture are overrepresented. We are, I believe though, on the crest of a wave in Australia that is fueled by education. We're now seeing more Aboriginal children graduate from high school than ever before. Sure, there's still a disconnect between finishing high school and everything it takes to be able to do that as an Aboriginal girl, and then gaining access to further education in the university system. There's still more work to be done there. But we are seeing more Aboriginal girls graduating from high school with a sense of purpose and hope and promise, and equipped with more skills and a much stronger voice than we ever have before. It's a wave that is going to reshape our nation. I'm really positive about it. I think these young women are finding their place in society, a place that their grandmothers knew, a place that their great-grandmothers knew, a place that Aboriginal women have always known. I think that young Aboriginal women are reconnecting with that strength, a strength that has always been there. And they're taking their place in society. And what that's going to do for Australia is it's going to help this nation finally to see the true value of Indigenous culture. It's going to help Australia to begin to really celebrate that we alone as a nation, and in the entire world, we alone can lay claim to the longest continuing culture. A culture that has been celebrated conservatively on this continent for 50,000 years. I do come from a very musical family. I inherited my voice from my mother, Monica. She inherited her voice from her mother, Frances. Of course, the most famous member of our family would be Jimmy Little. And his success is still celebrated today, even though, of course, sadly, we lost Jimmy a couple of years ago. Music is my way of knowing the world and giving meaning to everything in it. You know, in traditional Aboriginal practice, the song is at the heart of our way of knowing. There's a lot of talk in Australia about literacy. It's one of the gaps that politicians would like to close, or at least they say they would like to close this gap of literacy levels for Aboriginal children as compared to literacy levels for non-Aboriginal children. I think that we are incredibly literate, not necessarily in the written word, but we have an ability to listen that has been developed over more than 1,000 generations. We have an emotional literacy that we bring to the table in 21st century Australia. Our way of passing on knowledge has been so inextricably linked to song that what I'm trying to do right now for myself is connect as deeply as I can to that tradition and to help Aboriginal children to reconnect to their song, to this way of knowing. And time again, I see children empowered through song in a way that sitting them down and helping them to read a book, yes, that is important. Yes, that is necessary. But if we can access that way of knowing, that ancient way of knowing and passing on information through song, then we'll see these children leap ahead, and in such a joyful way. Do not accept the burden of low expectation. Do not accept this from without, and do not accept it from within. We have experience to bring that increasingly the world will need. We have in Australia more than 1,000 generations of song to share. And within that song is the knowledge of those 1,000 generations. Set your limitations to, actually, no limitations. Do not accept the limitations. Listen to the voice that's deep within you, that is driving you on. That voice is your ancestor calling to you, encouraging you, helping you to see the bigger picture, helping you to view the world through a much longer lens. Trust yourself. Listen deeply. Set no limitations. 5 years ago, I set out to create an Indigenous opera company in Australia. That company, Short Black Opera, is now 5 years old. My aspirations for the company and for myself are to share the beauty of Indigenous culture with the broader Australian community, to empower our young women and men to find their voice, to strengthen that voice. Short Black Opera has had as its main vehicle these 5 years the opera Pecan Summer, which tells the story of the 1939 walk-off from Kamragunja Mission, a story that I found myself connected to very deeply, as my Aboriginal grandmother and grandfather were part of that walk-off from the mission station, taking their destiny into their own hands with that act of defiance. That story will shortly go to Bennelong Point in Sydney, the Sydney Opera House. It's been a long-held dream of mine to take an Aboriginal opera to the spiritual home of opera in Australia and say, we have a voice. Listen to us. Celebrate our culture. I think if that helps Australia as a nation to mature, where we can actually move beyond singing in our national anthem that we're young, if we can actually embrace our maturity by harnessing the energy of more than 1,000 generations of knowledge on this continent, then I think that my dreams and aspirations will be fulfilled. My particular way of advancing that picture is through the world and the power of opera.